Hello, you lovely people, and welcome back to Sabbatical Stories. I'm your host, Bex Thomas, and I'm back in France for the remainder of the European summer. Today I'm joined by Danielle, otherwise known as DDH, simply because I won't do her surname justice and she can introduce herself way better. Danielle is a revenue operations and sales enablement specialist and somewhat of a legend in the Sydney sales community. Her sabbatical story was prompted by her husband's 2-year health battle, but the outcome is certainly a happy one. We delve into how to ask your manager for a sabbatical and how to navigate the business policy, how to best financially plan for such a break, setting intentions, and how time can really help you get in touch with your inner wisdom and ultimately, and most importantly, find fun again.
Deep down, you've tried, dig deep, search wide, enjoy your climb, it's all for you.
Hi Danielle, and thank you so much for joining us on Sabbatical Stories and taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us. I really do appreciate you and your time.
Of course.
So, as it's exactly that, your story, could you give us a bit of an introduction to you, Danielle, and your sabbatical story?
Sure thing. So my name is Danielle Dacunha-Howarth. I am half Portuguese, half English. Currently living in Lisbon, Portugal. Been in Australia for the past 10 years, but hail obviously from the UK, from beautiful Yorkshire in the north of England. I run my own business. I have a consulting firm called Purple Patch. There's kind of two sides to my business, which is B2B, go-to-market, sales enablement, revenue operations. And the other side is I do a lot of coaching with people one-to-one around career, health, life, that kind of stuff. So that's me. That's who I am. In terms of my story, so my husband and I actually took a sabbatical at the end of 2019. That sabbatical was very much prompted by a really challenging health issue that my husband had and that we battled for nearly 2 years until we, kind of got him out of that dark hole. And as you can imagine, that time was really tough, really, really tough for the two of us. And I was very lucky that at the time I worked for Salesforce, who are an incredible company and definitely have some of the most amazing support, I think, for employees, for a global company. We were kind of coming to the back end of this, and Ian and I had talked about a sabbatical for a long time, way before this. However, the situation that we were in obviously kind of made us want to bring that, like, put a stamp on that, put a date on that to, really come out of this health issue where Ian had not been able to kind of travel, and we're both from the UK. So being stuck in Australia and not being able to see friends and family or travel anywhere was really hard. And so, I approached my manager and kind of said, hey, like, I'd really like to take the company policy up on this sabbatical that's available to us, so that Ian and I can take some downtime from what we've been through. We can travel. We can also go home and spend time with friends and family where it's not, in that kind of 14-day, like, fly in, fly out, rush up and down the country to kind of see people and really think about where we want to go, what we want to do, and what we want to spend, that time for. So that's kind of my story and how our sabbatical came to be at the end of 2019.
And so how long did you take off, and talk us through the considerations of how you came about the date and how long you were going to take off, and then we can delve a little bit into the conversation you had with your employer, because I think that's a really interesting one.
Yeah. So, like I said, this was something that we had been considering for a long time. This was really forced upon us to make us think about it. But I think what actually brought Ian and I to talk about sabbatical full stop in the early days was, we don't have children. I still don't think we're going to have children. That's very much a personal choice for us. And the thought of working until we're 65 to then go and enjoy life, holidays, etc., just seems alien to me, particularly driven by the fact that my husband Ian lost his dad when he was in his mid-20s, and his dad was an incredibly hard plumber, grafter, worked really, really hard and had all of these dreams for his retirement with my husband's stepmom. And he turned to retirement age, was diagnosed with lung cancer, and unfortunately passed away 4 months after that diagnosis. And so I think there were, there's two things for both of us, right? And Ian's dad used to say to him, this is not a dress rehearsal. Like, you have to enjoy life. You can't keep just kind of planning for the future. And when I first met Ian's stepmom, I remember a conversation she was having with Ian. They were in the front of the car and I was in the back, and they were reminiscing and talking about Ian's dad and all the things that they were going to do. And I just sat there thinking, gosh, that's so sad, right? That's just so sad. So yeah, so that's how the conversation about sabbaticals I really started for the both of us, along with, I also read an article years ago about the new retirement, right? And the new retirement is not wait until you're 65. The new retirement is working really hard for 3, 4, 5 years, planning that sabbatical, planning your finances around it, and then actually going, enjoying travel whilst you have the energy. For some people, even whilst you've got your kids that are young, and you can go away and do that with them as well. So that's very much, where the sabbatical idea, I think, came to the forefront for Ian and I.
How did you decide how long to take?
We went for 4 months. The reason for that, of course, we would have gone for 6, 8, 12 months if we could have done. The 4 months is really dictated by when Ian was ill. He basically started planning his kind of own business. He had, sounds awful, been supported by his employer, and then unfortunately was made redundant 2 days before he actually went in for major surgery to sort out what was happening to him. And I think that was a bit of added financial pressure, but also he was actually really excited about this opportunity to go, you know what, he'd run his own business before. I'm going to go back to running my own business, and actually I want to take this time to plan it and then come back and execute it. So for us, the reason that it ended up being 4 months was really, we felt that was a really good amount of time for us to take off. And he was actually super excited to kind of get back and start putting things in motion for what was the next phase in his career.
And you were employed at the time.
Yeah.
How did you know about the sabbatical policy that the company had? Like, was that something that was very openly promoted? Did you have to go digging for it? Talk me through, how you know about it and what the policy was.
That is a great question. How did I find out about it? I think I went looking for it. I don't ever remember my manager particularly talking about it. I had heard actually of people that had gone and done sabbaticals internally. So that definitely will have gone, oh, yeah, okay, people do actually take sabbaticals here. That's interesting. So yeah, my manager didn't bring it to me. I definitely went and sought the information. However, yeah, I had heard of people internally, taking that time. So I knew there was a policy.
And what was the policy? Were there any sort of stipulations around how long you'd been with the company, or how long you could take off, whether it's paid, unpaid, that sort of thing?
Yeah, there was, as you can imagine, a very detailed policy from Salesforce around what could and couldn't be done. There was definitely caveats around the amount of time that you've been with the organization, planning well in advance. It's unpaid, right? Like the guarantee of you having a role, even if I remember rightly, was again not guaranteed. Like, I think if depending on the amount of time that you were taking, like I think it was something like if it was 12 months or over, then your role was not guaranteed, because naturally a business has to like manage that time off, right? Are they going to go out and spend recruitment time to bring in somebody to cover you and then train them up? And so there definitely is a balance there. For me, because it was 4 months, it was very much a look, we can handle that workload for 4 months. And that was the conversation that I had with my manager at that time. And again, just incredibly supportive, knowing like what we kind of been through, because he very much lived through it with me, as did the rest of the team.
And how did you approach that conversation with your manager?
I'm very lucky, like great relationship with my manager, still really, really great friends today as well, which is lovely. I basically said, look, I've looked into the company policy. I'm aware that there are sabbaticals available, and I'd really love to sit down and have the conversation about how I could make that happen. Because, Ian and I want to kind of plan for taking a sabbatical when we think he's kind of going to be out of this and had the surgery and more in kind of recovery mode. And he was like, great. Like, so I think for me, the key to that was not launching it on him in a one-to-one and just going, let's talk about this now. I very much just over a coffee kind of said, I want to talk to you about this. Have a think, go and read the policy documents. I'll read them as well. And so we entered a conversation where we'd both kind of done our research. He had a chance to go and speak with HR if that was necessary for him, and to really think about when as well. There are, in any organization, in any business unit, peaks and troughs in your business unit. So there are also better times of year to take them. And I also knew when those were. So I think I was able to then better pitch. This is when I'm thinking, this is why I'm thinking this time of year, et cetera, et cetera. And a good example of that would be, in the role that I was in, which was at the time sales enablement. Q4 for any organization in sales enablement, I call it shield the field, like you want your people closing, right? So Q4 is busy because you're usually readying for like your launch of Q1 and any sales kickoffs or anything like that. However, it's a bit quieter in terms of actual delivery. Like you're not really going to be delivering a huge amount of enablement training or rolling out any new initiatives. So that does take, a good chunk of the pressure off.
I think it's a really good point, that whole how to pitch it to a manager or to the company, because absolutely, of course, there are considerations always, but it's very much something that I work with individuals on, is those that are slightly nervous, or there's a lot of guilt sometimes around, oh, am I leaving my colleagues with all of this work, or what are the consequences around that? But I think certainly from my own experience, it's also a great opportunity for employers and for individuals to step up or maybe cover, a business unit or a role. You mentioned that your colleagues sort of managed the workload. Were there any examples of where it was actually a benefit for your employer?
Yeah, absolutely. So at that time, I kind of looked after the kind of commercial team and upwards. And, the way that enablement was kind of set up then was that, you had an enablement leader, let's say, that was aligned to a different segment. So yeah, absolutely. I know that the lady who was managing like the SMB team, let's say, then had the opportunity to kind of work with my stakeholders and some of my field team that, yeah, she probably wouldn't have got the exposure to had I not taken that time off.
And you mentioned that there wasn't potentially necessarily a guaranteed role to come back to. We'll obviously explore you coming back from sabbatical later, but did you come back to the same role, or what did that look like as you were negotiating actually taking the sabbatical? How did you navigate that conversation with your manager?
Yeah, so I'm probably not a very good example in this case, because I actually ended up leaving when I got back, because the time and the headspace that I had through my sabbatical made me very much reevaluate where I was in my life and my career and kind of what I wanted. So unfortunately, when I came back, I did hand my notice in to start my own business. And there was a part of me that felt incredibly guilty about that. But equally, again, I couldn't, they fought very hard to keep me, which was beautiful and amazing. But I am one of these people that when I've made my mind up, I've made my mind up. And that isn't going to be the byproduct for everybody. Definitely not. You will return. You will get straight back into work, and there will be a role there for you. In my case, I think it was very much driven by what we had been through. And if you or anybody else that you know or who might be listening to this has been through any form of health challenges, be it yourself or somebody very close to you, it completely changes the way that you think about life, like what you want, what you care about. You don't sweat the small stuff anymore. And to really think about, when work is such a huge part of your life, when 39 plus hours a week are dedicated to it, it really makes you think about, well, what do I want to be doing? And that headspace, which I may not necessarily had I not gone and done this, I could have probably just slotted straight back in. But for me, it was a real, it was the catalyst for me that really made me go out and do my own thing again, which was super exciting.
And you say you might not be a good example. Okay, maybe from the employer side, but actually from an employee side,
Yeah.
what a prime, amazing example to have taken that time. And I talk about sacred time a lot, and on sabbatical it being sacred time rather than that BAU time. And actually that's the byproduct of that, which leads us quite nicely actually into, so what did you actually do? You mentioned time to travel and go back to the UK, but what did you do on your 4 months? And what were the key intentions at the beginning for those 4 months?
So the key intentions for us, there was actually some fortuitous things that were going on around about that time as well. We had some weddings going on, which fell quite nicely into the plans. Like, oh, we've not been there. Let's go and do that wedding, which was lovely. We needed downtime. We needed rest. We needed very much for us, think about going from being a wife to being a carer to being a wife again. We needed to build a connection again as a couple. So we wanted relaxation. We wanted fun. We wanted things to laugh about, things to take pictures of. Family was huge. Ian and myself, we hadn't been able to travel because of his condition. Australia is not accessible for everyone. So wasn't like we were flooded with people coming to see us. So spending a really nice time, not just hanging out with people and having a cup of tea, like actually some quality time with our family as well, and having a great holiday. We were like, no expense spared. Like, I want the best hotels. We were like, we've saved all this money because we haven't been doing anything. So, we wanted to go out and eat well and holiday well. And so where did we go? So we ended up going to Tasmania for a holiday. We went to Queensland in Australia. We went to the Gili Islands, we went to Lombok, we went to Bali, we then went to Europe, and we did Italy and Portugal, and then we spent a big chunk of time at home, which just so happened to coincide with my mum's 60th birthday as well. And we were kind of in different parts of the UK. So it was great. It was amazing.
Is there one particular story around your travels that you could share with us that springs to mind?
So Ian's condition, Ian had something called intracranial hypertension, which is basically where you're leaking spinal fluid. And that causes all kinds of neurological problems. Like, it's basically all your nerves are like pulling on your eyes, and he had vertigo and tinnitus and nausea and double vision and all kinds of really freaky things. But it's all due to pressure, all about pressure and the brain. And we went to a beautiful place off the Gili Islands, and you can actually like dive down into these amazing, they've got sculptures under the ocean and things like that, and beautiful fish. And we're like, God, how are you going to get on like diving down? Because we didn't really know like the pressure and everything was. So we didn't do diving as in with masks and gas bottles or anything like that, but we went and did some kind of diving, and he went down, came back up, and okay, that felt okay, went a bit deeper, came back up. And I've got a picture of Ian like with his mask and his goggles under the water next to this amazing sculpture, and I was like, yes, like we're making progress, So that was really good. And then there was a really scary moment where when we actually did the longer leg from the UK to Italy, that's the first long haul flight that Ian had done in a long time. And again, airplane pressure. And we actually arrived in Rome, and he had major headaches, and I was like, oh no, we've broken him. But luckily after 2 or 3 days he kind of came around and everything. So it was like two really big like, this is great, and then what have we done kind of moments. They stand out.
Were there any other sort of preparation or things to consider because of his health that you really had to take into account, I suppose, on the lead up and the planning stage, but also being away for those 4 months?
Not really. I mean, again, it was more activities like what is he happy doing versus not happy doing. He had quite major spinal surgery, so I wasn't going to be like doing anything that involved bungee jumping or stretching or anything like that. So I think we just had to be mindful of just some of the activities that we did. In terms of preparation, it was really just the closer we got to the trips, like how well are you feeling? Do you still feel well enough to do this? Because it wasn't just he had the surgery and he was like fixed the next day. There was quite a big recovery process as well for Ian. But then you've got all your other things that, yeah, you have to consider, right? Financially, we weren't being paid. I wasn't being paid on my sabbatical. You know, I'm finance background originally in my career, so I'm very, spreadsheets are my thing. And, you know, I like to make sure that our paychecks, there are elements that go into particular accounts for certain things. You know, we'll always have a longer term savings. We'll always have like 3 months worth of wage. So yeah, there was that kind of additional planning for, hey, let's carve this off, and that'll cover us for like 6 months, 8 months if that really kind of got to the worst. But I think just that natural planning. We actually also decided to sell our place in Sydney around about that time as well. So when we left, we sold up, we put everything in storage, and then we were looking for a rental when we came back. But that was actually perfect planning for us, because it was like we actually have no rental, no nothing, just the storage costs, which actually felt quite freeing at that time, which was good.
The financial pieces are always a challenging one for people thinking about taking a sabbatical or jumping in if it's unpaid. Would you have any top tips for the audience around, you know, how to save for a sabbatical, and how long in advance did you plan your sabbatical?
I would say we started planning for it probably about, it wasn't as long a lead time as what most people probably have. I'd say it's maybe 6 to 8 months. And like I say, we had the added benefit of we actually hadn't been spending like we normally would, just because socially we couldn't. But you know, for me, it's like when it comes to finances, it's planning. That's all it is, right? And I mean, again, I'm an absolute stickler. If anybody wants to talk to me about like monthly planning, I'm your girl. But literally, I plan everything. I plan like how much do we spend on birthday presents and Christmas presents every year, and I have a little account for that. Like, it's so easy to be able to go, right, what could we get our outgoings down to? Like, bare minimum, what can we cancel, put on hold? Like, you know, if you own your own property, obviously it's very different to if you're renting. But if you own your own property, can you even make money out of that whilst you're away? Like, can you Airbnb it? Could you do a short-term rental? So for me, it was all about how do we get our outgoings to the absolute lowest that we possibly can, and what would that look like? And then actually, how much do we need to support us for literally how much do we need for 3 to 6 months? Like, give yourself a travel budget, give yourself a food budget, and that's it. And soon you come out with this figure and you're like, oh, well, I'll add 10% onto that just as a contingency. And then you go, right, when do I want to do it? How much do I have to save every week, every month? Okay, well, I need to save this. If I save that, I'd be able to do it in 12 months, 14 months, whatever that is. It's reverse engineering. That's all it is. Like,
Prioritizing as well, isn't it? I think.
And prioritizing.
When you work with people and it's like, okay, well, you're, you know, going out for 4 really amazing slap up dinners in Sydney a week, maybe just save one of them.
Yeah.
And see how that goes. It's prioritization
Totally.
as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not having your avocado on toast. It's what are the bigger things?
Yeah.
What are the bigger things?
What's going to turn the
can...
dial?
Yeah, absolutely. What are your bigger things? Like, we're not going to drink for a month. How much would that save you? And actually be a really healthy thing to do at the same time. Like, such simple things, right? But if you know that it's for a reason and it's something that's going to be absolutely amazing and life-changing, you know, come on, like, giving up drink for a month is nothing. So you're right. Prioritization is pretty key.
And it's individual, isn't it? It is individual on the person.
Yeah. What's your vice? Is it shoes or is it alcohol? Like, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned that you came back and a lot had changed from a mindset perspective and for obvious reasons. Was there anything that you intentionally did on your sabbatical to sort of get you to that point? Was that an intention going into the sabbatical that maybe you would be reevaluating things? Or talk us a little bit through things that you did or how your mindset shifted?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I was already training in my coaching. I think I'd been doing my course probably about 8 or 12 months, I think, from then anyway. That was always kind of something that I was doing, but more of as a side hustle. That was more, you know what, I want to do this because I get a huge amount of, just like joy from from coaching people in any way. And with what I did in my day-to-day, I've always been heavily involved in personal development, training, enablement, all those types of things. So that was already happening. That was already bubbling. But yes, there's a lot of practices that I did where I wanted to ask myself some quite deep questions when I don't have, 5 meetings a day to go to, or calls to be on an evening, or like a social life to even uphold. And, it's like you said, when you have the time and the space, you start to read the books that you've always wanted to read. Because when you're at work, the last thing you want to do is read another book about work. Whereas for me, that was actually the really perfect time to actually look at the research papers that I'd wanted to read, the books I'd wanted to read, which for me were very much centered around the work that I did in the day to day. And as I was doing it, and as I was, just asking myself questions in a notebook every day and sat in that beautiful environment without any pressures to go and do anything, I think I was really, for the first time in a long time, very much in touch with my inner, wisdom, call it, that was starting to come out at the end of a pen. Yeah, I think it started off as, maybe I could do this. Well, what would it look like if I did that? And why would that be good for me? And what would that allow me to do? And I think just, having that space and time to ask me those questions, to the point where I was like, you know what? I'm not going to go back. I need to do this. And again, double the risk, right? My husband's going out and doing work himself. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. And we don't have a regular income coming in. I mean, it was risky, but I just knew that. So did I approach it with a kind of step-by-step guide? No, but did I know that I wanted to use that time in a way to just uncover what I wanted to do a little bit more in the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years? Then I definitely carved that out.
And you also said about the transition from wife to carer to wife, and you and Ian reconnecting.
Mm-hmm.
What and how did you go about that on that sort of 4-month period?
Having fun again. Just, gosh, you know what it's like. And we don't even have children, right? We have a fur baby. But life is just all consuming. I think if you don't have children, at least your children make you stop, right? At least your children make you stop and go, I've got to go pick them up from school. I have to cook them dinner. And you might jump back online and start working again. The problem that we had was that, work could just roll on until late in the evening. And because of the work that we both do, we do work with international teams. We do work long hours, early hours, late into the night. And so, I think, and then obviously with Ian being unwell, it was just like to not have that routine, to not have that any snitching at each other about why didn't you unload the dishwasher? When you remove all of that day-to-day baggage, let's call it, or crap, you just get back to having a bit of fun again. I felt like, it's when we first met and I was excited in the morning to kind of get over what we're doing today and just laugh a lot. I mean, I love to laugh, Bex, right? Laughing is absolute medicine to me. And my husband is the funniest man in the world. He's hilarious. Yeah. And I think that, and just, being intimate again, if I can be super honest, at any time of day, and not just a particular
having the time,
day, a particular day of the week in between when we're doing these things, all that, definitely contributed to just, seeing each other again.
You made a good point. The dog.
Oh, yeah. Did
you have the dog before the sabbatical?
We did. Yes, we did. That was...
So what did you do with the fur baby?
Oh, that was the hardest thing. Well, we got dog sitters. So we used an amazing website called trustedhousesitters.com. Actually started in the UK. It's now a global thing. Because some of the bits we were kind of close by. We were doing a bit of Australia. We were, Tasmania. So it wasn't the full kind of 4 months that we were kind of away and left her. I think it ended up being 3. Yeah, we used Trusted House Sitters, and I was really strict on who I was going to have looking after my dog. But we had the most amazing couple. And we knew that she was looked after and going to be walked all the time. And, we interviewed a lot of people as well to make sure we got the right people.
And you'd sold your house. So did they take her in to their house? Yeah, okay.
Correct, yeah.
So she was very, very well looked after. And the interview process, I can imagine, was extremely stringent.
It was. It was, yeah. I mean, she's older now. Like, gosh, I don't think I could leave her for that amount of time now. She's a lot older than she was then. But yeah, and again, it was, we both love our dog to bits, but I think that the need for us was far greater at that time.
So you both came back to very different identities, I suppose. You having shifted from corporate to then doing your own thing, and actually Ian as well. What were the challenges on return, and how did you overcome those and try and not lose what you'd learned and your takeaways from your 4-month sabbatical?
That is a big question. I think I was most worried about telling my boss. Genuinely, I was honestly, and when I did tell him, it just all kind of blurted out. And then I'm not an emotional person, but I ended up like getting really emotional because it was all so pent up. And like I say, he and the other kind of big manager both did the best to try and keep me, and it was incredibly humbling, right, for people to even try and do that, which was beautiful. But no, I just knew I was ready for it. I'd run my own business before. I know what's expected, and I actually really thrive in that environment. Like the drive, I really enjoy that. I enjoy the pressure and the drive. Ian, again, had also worked for himself previously, and I think for him it was very much more about being able to look after himself, like, and take on the level of work that he was comfortable with, rather than it being, particularly in like agency and digital land, it's quite high pressure again. And again, like we were like, if we keep our outgoings low, we're absolutely fine. We can go and eat in restaurants, and it's bring your own bottle, like there's so many ways to just keep things cheap. But neither of us needed to worry because our network came forward for us. Like, I always believe your network is your net worth. We both were just incredibly lucky to have customers immediately. And that was a great feeling. It was a really good feeling.
And then how did you integrate or lace through your learnings from your sabbatical? Because it's an interesting one. I was talking to somebody the other day who said, the challenge sometimes, or the hardest part, is coming back or coming home, especially if your sabbatical has involved travel and going back and seeing family and all of those lessons and learns, and especially with Ian and his health. How did you stay true, I suppose, to the new identity that you'd brought back from your sabbatical?
Yeah, there's no doubt that things fall off. The intentions to continue meditating for 20 minutes every day, the intentions to, like carve out time for just the two of us once a week. It does fall off, right? Like it absolutely does. For me, the kind of returning, I'm not the kind of person that could just travel 12 months a year and keep traveling. Like, I really like routine. I really like nesting as well. So, for me, I think getting back into a routine was like super easy and very pleasurable for me. So that type of integration, no problem whatsoever. But I do think we fall off the wagon. I would say Ian in particular, I think sometimes his body gives him a bit of a jolt to go, hey, remember that time when you weren't very well? And again, working for yourself, I think people have this weird idea that, you don't work Friday and you don't work Monday and, you clock off at 4, but it's absolutely not true. You probably do a lot more hours. You just have a bigger smile on your face because it's all coming into your bank account instead of somebody else's. And yeah, you might be able to take a bit longer off at Christmas, which is really nice. I think it is just be prepared for the fact that, don't kick yourself too hard, that you might come back and the 10 things that you intended to do, you've done 6 or 7 of them. Take the 6 or 7, right? Like, life is busy, life is hard. Yeah, you'll find what works for you.
I always talk about being kind to yourself, and I think it's a great point. Is 80-20 rule, isn't it?
Totally.
If you can do 7 or 8 of the 10 things that you promised yourself, then you're on a bloody good wicket, I'd say.
I agree. And have loads of pictures of what you did there around, because I think bringing that back to the forefront of your mind is incredibly powerful. So I'd encourage people to print off like the top 3, 5 photos from that trip and have them where they're visible, just to keep reminding you of that feeling.
I love that. One of my friends actually created, and obviously you have to have the room to do this, but created a career break room. So in their house, when they came back, created this room that was almost to replicate the sacred space. So it had a meditation corner, it had all of their pictures, like a collage of all of their travels and everything, so they could just go in and be joyful, and it remind them of that space and of that time every single day that they pass the door, or so yeah, I think so. It leads me on actually to how I love to finish the conversation, which is, what would be your 3 top tips to somebody who is thinking about taking a sabbatical or career break, or just about to embark on one?
All right, so number 1 would be plan it. Like, just, even if it is literally research first, what can I do? What will my company allow? What are the caveats? Like, understand that. Just speak to HR privately. Like, just do your research. Like, understand what is actually available to you and how it could work. As I mentioned before, also just researching your role. Are there quieter times? Are there times that would make more sense to present that? The second would be start reverse engineer. Like I said earlier, right? Like, when do you want to do it? What would need to happen? How could you plan for it, save for it, etc., etc.? Like, that's just, super key. And then the third one would be, I think you kind of touched on it actually, it was the intention setting. Like, if you're doing it on your own, or you're doing it with your partner or friends or whoever, don't let that time kind of pass you by. Be really intentional about what you're doing with that time and why. I mean, whether that is, am I going to document this whole thing, and how am I going to do a blog, whether it's something like that, or whether it's I'm going to go and you might do some training along the way. You might have always wanted to have done a photography course in Rome or something. Like, it doesn't just have to be traveling. It can be training. It can be, I met a girl the other day who went to Italy and did an acting course for 12 weeks. Like, how incredible is that? Like, when are you ever going to go and do an acting course and spend? So I think, just being really intentional with that time, and not just going, I'm going to go and booze it up for 12 weeks or 6 months. That'd be my advice.
I love the documenting concept. And actually, it's interesting, I was talking to Steve Duke on an earlier episode of the podcast, and one of his intentions was he knew he didn't want to do what he was doing now, but he didn't know what he wanted to do after his career break. And so his intention was to talk to lots of different people about all different careers and what they look like and what they do, and the good and the bad and the ugly.
Love that.
And he decided to document it using a podcast. So he did 52 episodes speaking to different people about what they do on their career or as their career. And that's how he documented it. And I think that's a beautiful way. Sometimes people will do it with art, or it could be journaling or a blog, as you say, or, Steve's was a podcast. So I love that idea of documenting it. Thank you so much for your time, Danielle, and sharing your story. And if anybody wants to find you or get in touch, where is best? How do they do that?
So you can get in touch with me at Danielle at visitpurplepatch.com, or you can go to my website, visitpurplepatch.com. If you're a friend of Bex's, you could even get my mobile number from Bex. She might give it out to you. But you can catch me on that, or LinkedIn. Would love to hear from anybody, whether it's about this topic or anything else. I love growing my network.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. You take care.
Of course. You too.
Let's try to keep this real. And it's like she said, we're all affected, yeah. And it's like he said, I won't let it out. Turn the other cheek, show them.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Sabbatical Stories. I really do appreciate each and every one of you taking the time to join us. Thanks to DDH for sharing her sabbatical story, one that truly demonstrates how taking time off with your partner can help remove the day-to-day baggage of life, reignite intimacy, fun, connection, and lead you to a whole new life on the other side. Danielle's LinkedIn profile and link to the website will all be in the show notes below, so please do feel free to reach out to her. Thank you as always to Auntie B at the Flaxen, my amazingly patient and talented producer. I also want to give a special shout out to the incredibly talented Joanna Cook, whose soulful blend of smooth vocals we are lucky enough to use throughout the show. If you are interested in sharing your story on Sabbatical Stories, please do get in touch. Message me on Instagram, sabbatical_stories, or find me at Rebecca Thomas on LinkedIn. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate if you could subscribe, like and rate the show. It really would mean a lot to me. Also, if you think a friend will like the episode, please do buzz it over to them. After all, sharing is caring. Until the next time, take care and dream big.
The other cheek, show them your smile.